All right. So ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do now is we're going to determine the truth of this statement. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, when we talked about our truth of a statement, remember we have two statements. We have P and we have Q, right? Where P is your hypothesis, and remember Q was your conclusion, right? Now, the only time we have a false statement is when, does anybody remember? When was the only time we have a false statement? The only time a statement is false. Does anybody remember? Yes, David?
When one is true and the other one's false.
Right, but which one is?
The first one's true and the second one's false.
Right, exactly. The only time, ladies and gentlemen, because we could have, if that's true, then our statement is true. If we have true hypothesis, false conclusion, the statement's false. But the other two, which everybody gets confused with, is if my hypothesis is false, it doesn't matter what the conclusion is. If my hypothesis is false, it doesn't matter what the conclusion is. My statement is still going to be true. All right? So what we need to do is now determine, all right, is my statement going to be a true statement or a false statement? And if it's false, we need to provide a counterexample. So what we have here is if two angles are congruent. All right? So let's pretend we have two angles that are congruent. That means they have the same measure, right? Then it says, then they are vertical angles. So what we need to do is, can we show that this is true and false? Can we show two angles that are equal in measure that are not vertical angles? So to go back to remember vertical angles are angles that are across from each other, right? They share a vertex, and they don't share any sides. That's an example of vertical angles. Is it possible for two angles to be exactly the same that are not vertical? Is it possible? Could we have adjacent angles that are exactly the same? Yeah, well, let's go and take a look. All my angles need to do is be the exact same measure, right? All my angles need to do is be the exact same measure. So what about if I did this? I said, let's say I say that those two angles are 30 degrees and 30 degrees. Are those two angles the exact same measure? Are they vertical? No, they're adjacent, right? They share a vertex and they share a side. So therefore, if these are not vertical angles, so therefore that's false, but are they congruent? Yes, so it's true, but it's false because they're not vertical angles. So you could say adjacent angles with the same that are exactly the same would make this false. So therefore the statement is false. Okay? But if you just can't write true or false, you have to be able to provide a counterexample. All right? It's not a 50-50 if you're going to get the problem right. If you say false, then you're going to have to provide a counterexample. All right? OK. Now, let's go into